Hello and welcome to this edition of FLITernetTV. I'm your host, Brad Swanson. We are coming to you just a few blocks from Florida's capital, and we're here in the studios for Florida Internet and Television. Today, we are joined by Lisa Nelson, President and CEO of the American Legislative Exchange Council. Lisa, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Brad.
Well, all right. So before we get into a bunch of the details, if you would, tell us about ALEC. What is ALEC's mission? What are you guys all about?
ALEC was founded 46 years ago, back during the time when President Ronald Reagan was in office, and it was founded to concentrate a little bit more on the states and develop model policy and the tenets of limited government, free markets, federalism, individual liberty, and supporting and really helping free enterprise exist.
Yeah, I think it's so important. I am the private sector chair, so I know about this, so it's so fun to ask you these questions because I'm kind of cheating. I already know some of the answers, but I think for me, it's the balance between the elected legislators and the private sector. They both have to agree on policy, and it's for that freer economy and that freedom. Tell us a little bit about how those two groups work together.
Yeah, and that's the kind of secret sauce of ALEC. It really is that trusted source, because for the legislators, who are kind of a mile wide and an inch deep, they always want to learn more about the issues. And for the private sector, they always want to spend their time educating what the consequences of a piece of legislation may or may not be. Yeah. So ALEC affords that opportunity through our meetings and through the convenings that we have throughout the year for the legislators to ask the questions and to really kind of dig deep in finding a solution. And they're really focused on finding a solution that is a limited government solution. So they're trying to provide an answer to something without having an overreach by the government.
Yeah, I think the balance of good governance and being pro-business is such a common sense thing. You don't want government overreach. You don't want companies run wild, if you will. You want a balance and a common sense balance. And I think that's one of the neatest things I've seen as the thoughtful policy. So, okay, before we get into the types of policy, let's talk about what's coming up in Florida this summer.
Well, I'm really excited, and that's why I'm here in Tallahassee today. I'm bringing our national chair, Speaker of the House, Phil Gunn, from Mississippi, and we're meeting with several legislators and several members of the private sector to kind of gin up the annual meeting that we're holding in Orlando, Florida, July 15 to 17 this summer.
Get that buzz going in the Capitol so that they know about it, that it's coming this summer.
A little bit of a kickoff, and we're looking forward to hopefully having the governor and the lieutenant governor and possibly some other elected officials that are national level.
Well, what's great about the Florida elected officials is so many, are totally focused on those same ideals that I think ALEC is working on. So I think you're going to find a lot of symmetry as you run through the Florida Capitol. Okay, let's jump into some of the issues. When you run down it, I mean, what are the core areas? I mean, and it's a bunch of areas, but give us kind of the core areas that people need to pay attention to with ALEC.
So broadly, we have 12 different task forces that range and run the gamut from tax reform to education reform to healthcare reform, all the way to criminal justice and commerce, insurance, and economic development. So those task forces are how we convene the legislators in the private sector. And that enables everyone to really have that kind of more private, discrete conversation around what are the issues that exist. Yeah. I would say that because we're nonpartisan, we're really proud of the fact that in 3 areas in 2019, we were able to get to the finish line and have model policy and actually then move it through Washington, D.C. on criminal justice reform, which I know is a big issue here in Florida, occupational licensing, which is, of course, a great issue for Florida residents, and then the USMCA, which also has Florida implications.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, USMCA just literally trickles down to Florida's, a third of our economy is agriculture, and MCA affects that, but it's also trade. Florida's a huge trade, and MCA, affects that. So
and people say, what do the states have to do with a trade agreement?
Right.
Well, in fact, we worked with our legislators across the country to get resolutions passed supporting the USMCA. So building that groundswell of support from the states, saying to Washington, you got to really pass this because it's going to be good for those border states and also for the states that have a lot of influx.
Yeah. Well, I think another neat piece of policy that I saw was, in every community across America, we have Israeli and Jewish populations, and these state legislators were the ones that took action to kind of stand up for our partner in Israel. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, interestingly, our national chairman in 2019, Alan Clemens from South Carolina, is kind of an unsung hero on working on Israeli issues and making sure that the boycott issue, which is the BDS, you and I would call it the BDS issue, is something that legislators understand. So he's taken a stand on that. ALEC has been at the forefront of galvanizing a similar type of effort like I described with the USMCA. In drafting a letter and garnering signatures, I think we got something like 280 signatures from across the country, saying to companies, don't boycott, Israel and Israel products.
Well, I know Florida passed that with our legislature here, I want to say 3 or 4 years ago, and that was in partnership, obviously, with the work that ALEC is doing. And if you think about it, you think, like I said, every state has cultures and communities like that. Let's talk about criminal justice reform. Give us a little insight into, because most people would say, oh, that's a big government thing.
Yeah.
But what are you guys doing there?
What's interesting is, criminal justice reform has kind of taken on this national recognition just in the last year and a half. ALEC's been working on criminal justice reform for almost 14 years. And it's with the idea with a former ALEC member, Governor Rick Perry from Texas, that the prisons were getting bigger and the workforce was getting smaller. And why can't we, and why are we putting people away for things that now we might say that are potentially legal, like marijuana and things like that. So I think that there was a pendulum swing on the 3 strikes you're out, and I think the pendulum is kind of swinging a little bit back. But the focus really is on putting people back in the workforce, making sure that when if and when they do get out of jail and out of prison, that they can matriculate back in and the reentry is as seamless as possible.
Right. Fascinating, fascinating. Okay, so now we're going to go to one piece of policy at the state level, which is enormous from a budget standpoint. But let's talk about healthcare. When you think about healthcare, it's people talk about what happens at the federal level. They rarely will talk about the nexus between state level policy. What's ALEC doing in the world of healthcare?
That's a tough one. And every state is going to look at it differently because every state's got their Medicaid, Medicare issues set up differently. There's also different states filing for waivers through the Obamacare issue. I think there's a big push right now to really kind of recognize that and push the healthcare decisions back to each state.
Right.
And I think from the patient perspective that's probably the best way to look at it. When you think of national federal government addressing your healthcare, in your local city, when you might go to a hospital, you might go to an urgent care, you might have a different type of medical care that you go to, and I think that's the way we want to approach it.
Well, and I think with, from our members' perspectives and technology companies, people talk about telehealth, and these are areas where technology in the private sector is outstripping the pace of legislation.
Absolutely.
And I've seen ALEC play a big role in helping states to get their legislation at least caught up with the technology that's that day. You never can say what's going to come out tomorrow, but remote medicine and scope of practice and things like that are across the board. It's fascinating to see how ALEC helps legislators to navigate those
We set up a
topics.
Center for Innovation and Technology that was specifically going to look at that issue on remote issues, telehealth, teleeducation, anything that could be expedited. And the one thing that we talked a little bit about, the model policy. The idea for ALEC is to build that model policy, but it's not necessarily that every state has to use that model policy. They might take that model policy and take one piece of it that fits with their state. So that's the approach that we take. And we've had a really good success we've got over 900 model policies on I call it the library shelf, if you think about, kind of like a bookshelf. And legislators and staffers can take that model policy, see what works for their state, and then apply it in the right way.
Yeah, which is amazing. I think the resources that are there, I would always encourage our viewers to go check out your pages and your websites of your approved policies. Again, blessed by both the legislative side of the equation and the business side of the equation. And when I say business, it's not big business. It's everyone from Sarah's coffee shop to your largest businesses in the country that benefit from this kind of freedom-based policy. All right, so let's move off of healthcare and let's move to intellectual property. It's always a crazy space, but we know our friends over across the sea love to steal our intellectual property. How is ALEC engaging in that conversation?
So our intellectual property issues sit within our trade task force, just because that's where at the state level a lot of that is discussed and talked about. At the federal level, I think intellectual property sometimes is in the commerce committees, right, and could be considered in that area. I think what we are looking for is to obviously protect intellectual property of the small businesses and of even the larger businesses, and we've got several pieces of model policy in that area.
That's amazing. Okay, so we could talk about federalism, and you know what? We're going to bring up federalism, but I'm going to bring it up in the vein of the speakers that ALEC gets every year at its annual meeting. Kind of give me a short list of who the most amazing speakers have been there recently, and what people can expect, potentially this year.
Well, we're blessed to have a number of national figures that come to our meetings. I think Vice President Pence has spoken to our meeting a couple of times, even in the last few years since he was elected. It was the first big speech he gave when he was put on the ticket. Newt Gingrich comes. We had Democrat Governor Bell Edwards from Louisiana at our annual meeting in Louisiana a couple of years ago. We have lots of kind of media figures that come and speak, as well as education experts like Bill Bennett, Governor Rick Perry on energy issues. So it kind of runs the gamut,
right,
and we really try to concentrate on who's going to be inspirational, who is going to be forward-thinking, and who's going to speak to what the issues are that we're dealing with. Right. And in 2020, obviously, there's a presidential campaign, so we're going to have to be nimble and be able to kind of pivot off what the issues are as well.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. When you mentioned nonpartisan at the outset, I've seen it being a part of the organization, and I look at an issue like criminal justice reform, and that's an area that is so easy for people to digest nonpartisanship. It's in these other issues where you look at companies that are very progressive, if you will, in a lot of their policies, tech companies and things like that, yet they're still engaging on the breadth of ALEC policy for the betterment of just policy in general for these states.
Well, I think ALEC has been an ally of the tech companies ever since they became cool, I would say, because we really want to support innovation. We really want to support entrepreneurship, and that is, in a sense, what those technology companies have done.
Yeah.
They look at disruption and new ideas in the same way we do, and so we kind of are, we're looking for ways to support the tech community and make sure that they don't get, in this next political season, become the bully.
Yeah. Well, Lisa, thank you for sharing this. Final thoughts. What's next for you, and what's next for ALEC?
Well, I think that 2020 is going to be an amazing year. We're going to have a lot of policy issues to talk about, and we are very excited that Florida is the platform and the home of our annual meeting. Well, we're looking at 1,500 attendees, and we're just very excited to be here.
Yeah, well, we are too, and we look forward to helping you with that effort. Thanks for coming on. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
That's all the time we have for today's episode. Please tune in for future episodes and hit us up on our social media. For now, thanks for tuning in.